I left graduation smelling like a fresh gown, thinking I had finally made it. 2 hours later, I found a folder at our workshop where my name appeared just once, right under the phase-out plan. Mom told me I was only good with my hands, not my head. I did not scream. I just stopped saving them. Then Dad received a call from our biggest client, and their panic started for a reason they never saw coming. My name is Reagan Bennett, and the first thing I did after receiving my diploma was drive straight back to the dust and noise of Riverton, Oklahoma. I did not go to the parties. I did not go out for a celebratory dinner with friends. I drove my beat-up sedan down the familiar cracked asphalt of the highway, the scent of the fresh polyester graduation gown still clinging to my skin. It smelled like cheap plastic and static electricity, a sharp contrast to the smell I was heading toward. Iron hollow fixtures. That was the destination. The moment I stepped out of the car and walked through the metal side door of the workshop, the smell hit me. It is a specific blend of scents that you cannot wash out of your clothes. It is the smell of sawdust, industrial wood glue, hydraulic oil, and the metallic tang of heated steel. To most people, it smells like labor. To me, it smelled like the future I had just spent 4 years earning. The shop floor was loud. The high-pitched whine of the CNC router was cutting through a sheet of maple plywood, screaming like a banshee. Sparks were flying from the welding station in the far corner where we were assembling the frames for a new boutique retail chain in Dallas. I walked past the edge bander, running a hand along the cool metal of the outfeed table. I knew every bolt, every belt, and every quirk of these machines. I knew that the table saw on the left had a tendency to drift if you did not lock the fence down with 2 hands. I knew the forklift had a sticky brake pedal that required a firm stomp. I had spent the last 7 years inside these metal walls. While my friends were going to football games or spending their weekends at the lake, I was here. I was sweeping floors at 16. I was learning to weld at 18. By the time I was 20, I was running the floor schedule. For the last 2 years of my degree in operations and supply chain management, I had been working 60 hours a week while taking full-time classes. I slept 4 hours a night. I drank black coffee until my stomach burned. I did it because Iron Hollow was family, and family helps family. I walked up the metal stairs to the mezzanine level where the offices overlooked the shop floor. My father, Grant, was sitting behind his desk. He looked tired. He always looked tired. He was on the phone, likely with a supplier, rubbing his temples with grease-stained fingers. He saw me and covered the receiver. "Hey, kid," he said. "Congrats on the paper. Thanks, Dad," I said. I felt a surge of pride. I finally had the credentials to match the work I was already doing. I was ready to officially take the title of project coordinator. I was ready to be paid a salary instead of the hourly wage that barely covered my gas. I was ready to be a partner. "Look, I need a favor," he said, his voice stressed. "I cannot find the liability insurance renewal for the fleet. The broker is on hold. Go check the archives in the back room. It should be in the filing cabinet near the window." I nodded. Just like that. The graduation was over. I was back to work. I went into the back storage room. It was a cramped space filled with boxes of old invoices and tax returns from 10 years ago. The filing cabinet was a beige metal monstrosity that jammed if you pulled the drawer too hard. I yanked the third drawer open. It was a mess. Files were shoved in haphazardly. I started flipping through them, looking for the insurance tab. Invoices, tax liens, employee contracts. My fingers stopped on a thick navy blue folder. It was brand new. The label on the tab was crisp and printed in a clean, sans serif font that looked out of place among the handwritten scrawls of the other files. Ownership transfer. 12-month plan. I frowned. We had never discussed selling the company. My heart did a little skip. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the legal structure for bringing me and my sister. Sloan, into the fold officially. I pulled the folder out. It felt heavy in my hands. I opened it. The first page was an executive summary. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes darting across the paragraphs. Effective immediately upon the start of the fiscal year, Total Equity Transfer Management Restructuring, I turned the page to the organizational chart. That was when the air left the room. It felt as if someone had punched me in the solar plexus, right under the ribs. At the top of the chart was a box labeled CEO, Majority Owner. Inside the box was the name Sloan Bennett. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes, thinking the fluorescent light was playing tricks on me. I looked again. It still said Sloan, my younger sister, Sloan, who was 22 and had spent her college years studying communications and rushing a sorority. Sloan, who thought a Phillips head screwdriver was a cocktail. I flipped the page frantically. Where was I? I had to be there. I was the one who managed the supply chain. I was the one who negotiated the steel prices. I was the one who stayed until 2 in the morning when the laminate glue failed on the rush order for the airport kiosk project. I found my name on the third page. It was under a section titled Transitional Staffing and Redundancy. Reagan Bennett. Role Operations Support. Status 12-month phase-out period. Objective transfer institutional knowledge to new management before termination of role. Phase out. The word echoed in my head. Phase out. Like an old machine that was too expensive to repair. Like a vendor we no longer needed. I did not cry. That is the strange thing about true devastation. It does not hit you with tears. It hits you with a ringing in your ears, a high-pitched tone that drowns out everything else. My heart started beating against my ribs, a hard, rhythmic thud that I could feel in my throat. They were firing me. No, it was worse than firing. They were using me. They were keeping me for 12 months to teach Sloan how to do the job I had earned. And then they were discarding me. I closed the folder. My hands were shaking. Just a little. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of dust and old paper. I walked out of the back room. I walked past my father, who was still on the phone, laughing at something the broker said. I did not stop. I walked down the metal stairs, past the screaming saws, and out the side door. I drove home to my parents' house for the celebratory dinner. The house was warm. It smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken. My mother, Denise, was setting the table in the dining room. She was wearing a nice blouse, her hair perfectly coiffed. Sloan was sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone, wearing a dress that cost more than my tuition for a semester. "Hey, the graduate is here," Sloan chirped, looking up. She had that bright, camera-ready smile, the one she used for her Instagram stories. I did not smile back. Dad came in a few minutes later, washing the grease off his hands in the kitchen sink. He walked into the dining room, rubbing his hands together. "All right, let us eat," he said. "Big day." I stood at the head of the table. I had the blue folder in my hand. I placed it gently in the center of the table, right between the salad bowl and the roasted potatoes. The silence that followed was instant. It was heavy. It sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Dad stopped mid-step. He looked at the folder, and his face went pale. He knew exactly what it was. Mom paused with a serving spoon in her hand. She looked at the folder, then at me. Her expression did not change. It remained perfectly calm, almost bored. Sloan frowned. "What is that?" she asked. I pulled up a chair and sat down. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I just looked at them. I went looking for the insurance papers. I said, my voice sounded strange to my own ears. It sounded very flat, very cold. I found this instead. Dad cleared his throat. He pulled out his chair and sat down, avoiding my eyes. "Reagan, we were going to discuss this. We were waiting for the right time, when I asked, after I spent another year training Sloan. After I gave you another 2,000 hours of unpaid labor, Mom set the spoon down. She clasped her hands on the table. She looked at me with a gaze that was terrifyingly steady. "It is a business decision." "Reagan," she said. "A business decision," I repeated. "To give the company to the person who has never spent a full day on the shop floor. To fire the person who just got a degree specifically to run this place." Sloan bristled. "I have ideas." "Reagan, I have a vision for the brand. It is not just about making cabinets. It is about lifestyle." I looked at my sister. "You do not know the difference between MDF and particle board." Sloan, that does not matter. Mom interrupted. Her voice was sharp. It cut through the air like a knife. I looked at my mother. Why, I asked. Just tell me why. Mom took a sip of her water. She set the glass down. She looked me right in the eye, and she delivered the sentence that would rewrite my entire life. You are just better with your hands, Reagan, not your head. The room went dead silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not an insult. It was a verdict. She believed it. She looked at me and saw a laborer. She looked at Sloan and saw an executive. She looked at my grease-stained cuticles, my work boots, my exhaustion, and she saw someone who was built to serve, not to lead. Dad shifted in his seat. Now, Denise, that is not entirely fair. He turned to me, looking pained. Reagan, honey, look, you are a grinder. You work hard. We value that. But running a business that takes a different kind of polish, Sloan has that presence. We have to think about the future image of Iron Hollow. Sacrifice, Dad added, grasping for a word he knew worked on me. You have always been willing to sacrifice for the family. We need you to do it one more time. For the future. Sloan smiled. It was a small, pitying smile. I will need your help. Obviously, she said. I want you to stay on as my operations manager. For a while. Until I get the hang of the boring stuff. The supply chains, the quality control, the safety protocols, the things that kept the roof from collapsing on their heads. I looked at the three of them. I looked at my father, who was waiting for me to fold. I looked at Sloan, who was waiting for me to serve her. Okay, I said. Dad let out a huge sigh of relief. He actually smiled. See, I told you she would understand. Reagan is a team player. Mom nodded. Satisfied? Eat your dinner, she said. It is getting cold. I cut a piece of chicken. I put it in my mouth and chewed. It tasted like ash. Inside my head, the ringing had stopped. The confusion was gone. The hurt was hardening into something else. It was cold. It was heavy. It was sharp. They thought they had won because they had the paperwork. They thought they had won because they had the titles. They thought they had won because I was just the girl who was good with her hands. But they forgot one thing. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried. I was the one who knew which contracts were precarious. I was the one who knew how to make the machines run. And more importantly, I knew exactly what happened when they stopped. I looked at the folder one last time. If they have calculated my life using paper, I thought, as I swallowed the dry chicken, then I will answer them with paper. I finished my meal in silence. The cliff edge was approaching, and they did not even know they were driving straight toward it. The silence in that dining room did not just start at dinner. It had started 15 years ago, in the back corner of the workshop, to the sound of a belt sander grinding against red oak. To understand why I sat there eating cold chicken while my family dismantled my future, you have to understand the invisible contract I had signed with them when I was barely old enough to drive. When I was 15, my weekends did not look like the weekends of the other kids at Riverton High. While my friends were going to the movies or hanging out at the Sonic Drive-In, I was putting on safety goggles and ear protection. I was the weekend shift. I was the cleanup crew. I was the extra pair of hands that did not cost the company a dime. I remember one Saturday in particular. It was October. The homecoming game was happening that night. I could hear the faint sound of the marching band practicing in the distance, carrying over the cool Oklahoma wind. I was inside the finishing booth, sanding down 30 mahogany tabletops that had to be shipped to a steakhouse in Tulsa by Monday morning. My hands were vibrating. That is a feeling you never truly forget. After 6 hours of holding an orbital sander, the vibration settles into your bones. Even after you turn the machine off, your hands keep shaking. Your teeth feel loose in your gums. Dad had walked in, checking the progress. He nodded at the stack of finished tables. Good work, Reagan, he had said. This is how we build a legacy. Sweat equity. You are learning the value of $1. I believed him. I thought I was paying dues. I thought I was buying my share of the future. 1 hour of sanding at a time. Then Sloane walked in. She was 12 then. She was wearing a clean white sweater and holding a digital camera. Mom had sent her to take pictures for the website. "Move over." "Reagan," Sloane had said, waving her hand at me. "You are making it look messy." I stepped aside, covered in fine mahogany dust that made me look like a ghost. Sloane stepped up to the table I had just spent an hour perfecting. She ran her clean hand over the smooth wood. She smiled at the camera. Click. Later that night, while I was scrubbing the stain off my cuticles with harsh soap that smelled like lemons and gasoline, Mom showed us the new website update. There was the picture, Sloane, looking pristine and thoughtful, touching the wood. The caption read, "A family tradition of excellence. We pour our soul into every grain." I looked at my hands. They were raw. They were red. "Mom," I said, "I did the work." Mom just patted my shoulder. "We know, honey, but Sloane just has that look. She looks like the customer wants us to look. You look like, well, you look like you have been working." That was the dynamic. I was the engine, and they were the paint job. As I got older, the dynamic shifted from physical labor to crisis management. I became the person they threw at the problems they did not want to touch. When a shipment of steel arrived rusted because Dad tried to save 5% on a discount supplier, I was the one who had to call the vendor and scream until they sent a replacement truck overnight. When a custom reception desk did not fit in the service elevator of a high-rise in downtown Oklahoma City, I was the one who drove out there at 3 a.m. with a circular saw and a plan to modify it on-site without ruining the veneer. I fixed things. I absorbed the stress so they did not have to. I remember a specific incident when I was 22. I was home from college for the summer, working full-time. The shop floor was chaotic. We were missing deadlines constantly because we had no real system for tracking inventory. We were running out of screws, glue, and laminate halfway through jobs. I spent 2 weeks building a new system. I created a digital inventory tracker. I built a checklist for the floor managers to sign off on before a job moved to the next station. I made a presentation. I had charts. I had data. I called a meeting with Dad and Mom. "Look," I said, sliding the papers across the desk. "If we implement this, we cut our waste by 15%. We stop missing deadlines. It is simple." Dad glanced at it. He rubbed his eyes. He looked bored. "Reagan, we have been doing this for 30 years, he said. "We do not need more paperwork. The guys on the floor hate paperwork. It slows them down." "But Dad," I started. "Grant is right," Mom cut in. "It is too complicated. Just make sure the guys know what they are doing. We do not need to reinvent the wheel." They dismissed it. They tossed my 2 weeks of work into the recycling bin. 2 months later, we had a family dinner. Sloane was home for the weekend. She had just taken a Business 101 elective. "I have this great idea," Sloane announced, pulling out her iPad. She swiped to a screen. It was a digital inventory tracker. It was simpler than mine, less detailed, and frankly, full of holes, but it was colorful. She called it the Iron Hollow Flow State. "Mom and Dad, we need to modernize," Sloane said, using her best presentation voice. "We need to track our materials so we can be more agile." I sat there, waiting for Dad to tell her that the guys on the floor hate paperwork. I waited for Mom to tell her not to reinvent the wheel. Instead, Dad sat up straight. He looked at the iPad. "This is sharp." "Sloane," he said, "this is really sharp. Flow state." "I like the sound of that. It sounds professional." Mom clapped her hands together. "See, this is what I mean about vision. Sloane sees the big picture. Reagan, why don't you help your sister implement this?" I felt something hot and acidic rise in my throat. It was the same idea. It was literally the same concept, just with less substance and a better name. I looked at Dad. "I pitched this to you 2 months ago." I said, "You told me it was too much paperwork." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "You came at it from a negative angle. Reagan, you were talking about fixing errors. Sloane is talking about flow. It is about the approach." I swallowed the anger. I swallowed it down like a pill that was too big for my throat. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that once I had my degree, once I had the official piece of paper that said Bachelor of Science in Operations Management, they would have to listen. I told myself that they were just dazzled by Sloane's novelty. But when it came down to running the business, they would need the person who actually knew how to execute. I was the cushion. I was the damper that stopped the machine from shaking itself to pieces. You do not notice the cushion until it is gone, but you definitely notice the paint. But looking back, the signs were there. They were not just ignoring me, they were erasing me. It started happening about 6 months before graduation. I would walk past the conference room and see Dad and Mom in there with our steel supplier. Usually, I was in that meeting. I was the one who negotiated the bulk rates. I knocked on the glass and poked my head in. "Hey, I did not know we were meeting with Jim today." Dad looked up, almost startled. "Oh, hey Reagan, no. Do not worry about it. We are just catching up. High-level stuff. You get back to the floor. We know you are busy with the warehouse reorganization." I accepted it. I was busy. I trusted them. Then the emails started dropping off. I used to be CC'd on everything from client complaints to shipping confirmations. Slowly, my inbox got quieter. When I asked Mom about it, she smiled that tight, PR smile. "We are just trying to take some things off your plate. Honey," she said, "you are finishing school. We want you to focus on your finals. We are protecting your time. Protecting my time." That is what they called it. I sat in my makeshift office in the corner of the warehouse, surrounded by invoices I had to chase down manually because nobody had forwarded me the digital copies. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. It was not protection. It was quarantine. They were isolating the virus. I was the virus. My competence was the virus. The realization did not hit me all at once. It was a slow creep, like rust on a bumper. It was the way the foreman, a man named Marcus, who had known me since I was in braces, stopped making eye contact when I asked about the new production schedule. It was the way Sloane stopped asking me for help with her homework and started asking me for passwords to the vendor portals. "Hey, what is the login for the Northline account again?" she had texted me 3 months ago. "I just want to look at their past orders to get a sense of their style." I gave it to her. I gave her the keys to the castle because I thought she was finally taking an interest. I thought she was trying to learn. I was so stupid. She was not learning. She was data mining. She was taking the contacts I had spent years cultivating and moving them into a spreadsheet that I did not have access to. The final straw, the thing that should have made me scream before I ever found that blue folder, happened 2 weeks before graduation. I was walking through the shop floor late on a Tuesday. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the concrete. Most of the crew had gone home, but Marcus was still there, cleaning his station. Marcus had been with us for 20 years. He was a man of few words, a welder who could lay a bead of steel so smooth it looked like liquid silver. He saw me walking by and stopped wiping down his bench. He looked around to make sure we were alone. "Reagan," he said. His voice was low, rough like gravel. "Yeah." "Marcus." I stopped. I was tired. My feet hurt. He hesitated. He looked down at his welding gloves. "You doing okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just finishing up school. Almost there." He nodded. He did not look up. "Good. You get that degree. You get it, and you keep your options open. You hear me?" I frowned. "What does that mean, I'm staying here?" "Marcus, you know that. I am going to run the operations." Marcus finally looked at me. His eyes were sad. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too many managers come and go. Too many promises broken. I do not know. "Reagan," he said, "just watch your back. They had us signing some weird papers last week. Non-disclosure stuff. New employee handbooks. New handbooks, I asked. I wrote the employee handbook. I have not updated it in 2 years. "Yeah," Marcus said. "That is the thing. Your name was not on this one. It was all new branding, and they made us sign a thing saying we understand the chain of command might be changing." My stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus shrugged. He looked defeated. A man with a mortgage does not ask questions. "Reagan, I am just telling you now because, well, you are the only one who knows how to calibrate the laser cutter. If you go, this place is going to be a mess. If I go," I laughed it off. I told him he was worrying about nothing. I told him it was just Mom trying to update the corporate image again. But that night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I replayed every interaction, every missed email, every silenced conversation. They were not just phasing me out on paper, they had already phased me out in the minds of the crew. They had already paved the road for Sloan. They had done it while I was busy keeping their business afloat, while I was busy studying to be better for them. I sat at that dining table, looking at the folder, and I realized that the past 7 years, the weekend sanding wood, the emergency deliveries, the unappreciated systems were not an investment. They were a donation. I had donated my youth to a family that saw it as a tax write-off. And the worst part, they truly believed they were doing the right thing. They believed that because I sweated, I belonged in the dirt. They believed that because Sloan sparkled, she belonged in the sky. I looked at my father, who was cutting his chicken as if he had not just severed his relationship with his daughter. I remembered the vibration of the sander in my hands when I was 15. I clenched my fist under the table. The vibration was gone. My hands were steady now, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to use them to fix anything. I was going to put them in my pockets, walk away, and watch the whole thing fall apart. The Monday after graduation, I walked into Iron Hollow Fixtures at 8 o'clock in the morning, not 7:30, not 6:45, 8 o'clock on the dot. For the past 7 years, my morning routine had been a frantic race to beat the sun. I would arrive early to warm up the CNC machines, brew the industrial-sized pot of coffee for the floor crew, and review the overnight emails from our East Coast suppliers. By the time the first welder punched his time card, I had usually solved 3 problems they never even knew existed. But today, I parked my car, turned off the engine, and waited. I watched the digital clock on my dashboard tick from 7:58 to 7:59. When it hit 8, I opened the door. I walked past the break room. The coffee pot was cold and empty. "Hey," Reagan, one of the junior fabricators, called out, holding an empty mug. "Coffee machine is busted or something. No brew today?" I did not stop. I did not apologize. I did not rush over to fix it. "I do not know," I said, my voice pleasant and detached. "You should probably check with the office manager about that." The office manager was Sloan, and Sloan did not drink coffee. She drank matcha lattes she picked up on her way in. I walked up the stairs to my desk, or rather, the desk that was now designated for operations support. I sat down and logged into the system. My inbox was already blinking with 12 unread messages marked as high priority. The old Reagan would have felt a spike of cortisol. The old Reagan would have opened 3 monitors and started multitasking, calling vendors on her cell phone while typing replies with her right hand. The new Reagan just took a sip of water and opened the first email. It was from a supplier in Ohio. "Urgent missing color code for the laminate on the Peterson project. Need answer by noon or shipment is delayed." I knew the color code. It was Wilson Art, 7921, Skyline Walnut. I had memorized it 3 weeks ago when I did the initial bid. I could have typed 4 digits and hit send, and the problem would have vanished. Instead, I looked at the sticky note on my monitor. It was a handwritten list of new protocols that Sloan had emailed out on Sunday night, full of corporate buzzwords about streamlined communication channels. According to the new chart, all material specifications were now the domain of the design and procurement lead. That was Sloan. I hit forward. Subject FWD missing color code. To Sloan Bennett, message. Please handle per new protocol. Vendor needs answer by noon. I hit send. Then I archived the email. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not guilt. It was lightness. It was the feeling of a heavy backpack being slipped off my shoulders. I was not sabotaging the company. I was doing exactly what they asked. I was letting the people with the vision handle the details. At 10 o'clock, the phone on my desk rang. It was Jim, our contact at the steel distribution center. "Reagan." "Thank God," Jim said, his voice sounding harried. "Look, I have a driver here with 2 tons of box tubing for your warehouse. But your receiving dock is locked. Nobody is answering the buzzer. I am on a schedule here." The receiving dock was locked because the foreman, Marcus, was in a mandatory culture and synergy meeting that Mom had insisted on holding this morning. Usually, I would have run down there with the keys myself. I leaned back in my chair. I am sorry. Jim, I said, I am actually in the middle of a phase-out report. You need to call the main line and ask for the director of operations. There was a pause. You mean Sloan? Jim asked, sounding skeptical. Reagan, just come open the door. The driver is pissed. I cannot. Jim, I said calmly, I do not have the authority to override the meeting schedule anymore. Hold on. I will transfer you. I pressed the transfer button. I did not warn Sloan. I just sent the call. Through the glass wall that separated my small cubicle from the executive office, I saw Sloan's desk phone light up. She was looking at her nails, probably checking for chips. She picked up the phone, looking annoyed. I watched. Sloan's expression shifted from boredom to confusion. She started shuffling papers on her desk. She mouthed something that looked like, "What door?" She stood up and looked through the glass at me. I did not look up. I was busy staring at my screen, typing a report titled Daily Activity Log. Sloan spent 20 minutes on that call. 20 minutes. I watched her pace back and forth, gesturing wildly. Eventually, she had to run down the stairs in her high heels to find someone with a key. By the time the door was opened, the driver had likely charged us a detention fee for the wait time, a fee that would come out of the profit margin. When Sloan came back upstairs, she looked flushed and irritated. She marched over to my desk. Reagan, why did you send that to me? She snapped. You know where the keys are. I looked at her, keeping my face perfectly smooth. I am following the chain of command. Sloan, I said, receiving issues fall under logistics. The transition plan says I am supposed to direct logistics inquiries to you, so you can learn the workflow. She opened her mouth to argue, but she stopped. She could not say, I don't want to do the work. Not when she had spent all weekend talking about how she was ready to lead. Right, she muttered. Well, next time, just give me a heads up. I will put it in the log. I said, by Wednesday. The cracks were starting to show in the shop. The guys on the floor were not stupid. They knew something was wrong. Usually, I spent half my day on the concrete, checking measurements, troubleshooting welds, and joking with the crew. Now, I stayed at my desk. When a problem arose like a shortage of 3/4-inch screws, Marcus came up to see me. He stood in the doorway of my cubicle, holding his cap in his hands. Reagan, we are out of screws for the bonding station, he said. I checked the supply closet. Empty. Usually you have a stash in the back. I did have a stash. There were 5 boxes hidden behind the archive cabinet for emergencies just like this. I am sorry. Marcus, I said, inventory is now managed through the digital portal. You have to submit a request ticket to Sloan. Marcus frowned. A ticket, Reagan. The line is stopped. I cannot wait for a ticket. Just tell me where they are. I turned my monitor so he could see the ownership transfer document I had saved as my desktop background. I pointed to the paragraph about inventory control. If I give you supplies without a ticket, I am violating the new audit trail. I said softly, I cannot risk my severance. Marcus, go ask Sloan. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. He saw the lack of emotion in my eyes. He realized then that I was not doing this to be difficult to him. I was doing this because I had been cut loose. All right, he whispered. All right, I get it. He walked away. He went to Sloan's office. I heard him explaining that the line was down. I heard Sloan say, well, why didn't someone order them last week? I knew why. Because last week, I was the one who ordered them. And last week, nobody had asked me to. The first missed deadline happened on Thursday afternoon. It was a small job, a custom reception desk for a dentist's office in the suburbs. It was supposed to ship at 4 o'clock. At 3:30, the delivery driver, a guy named Pete, came up to the office window. Paperwork ready, Pete asked. I looked at the pile of shipping manifests on the central table. They were unsigned. They required a final quality inspection signature. That was the CEO's job now, or the operations manager's. I pointed to the closed door of the conference room. Mom and Sloan were in there, looking at fabric swatches for the new office chairs. Not yet. Pete, I said. Pete waited. The clock ticked. 3:45. 3:50? Usually. I would have barged into the meeting, slapped the papers on the table, and said, "Sign this so Pete can leave." Instead, I continued organizing my personal files on the hard drive. At 4:15, Pete knocked on the conference room door. Mom opened it, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Yeah, I have been waiting 40 minutes for the manifest." "Denise," Pete said, "I am going to miss the loading window at the depot. This desk is not going out today." Mom looked at the papers, then at me. "Reagan, why didn't you prep this?" I stood up. I walked over calmly. I prepared the draft at 2 o'clock. I said, "I sent a notification that it needed a QC signature. I am not authorized to sign for quality control anymore. Remember you said my standards were too focused on the minutia and not the big picture." Mom's face tightened. She snatched the pen and signed the paper without even looking at the document. "Just get it on the truck," she hissed. It was too late. Pete had already called dispatch. The truck was leaving the depot without our cargo. The dentist's office would not get their desk for another 3 days. That evening, as I was packing my bag at exactly 5 o'clock, Mom cornered me near the time clock. She crossed her arms. The smell of her expensive perfume was overpowering in the small hallway. "You are proving my point. You know," she said. Her voice was low, laced with disappointment. "What point is that?" I asked, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "That you lack passion." She said, "Look at you. You are checking out the minute the clock hands touch the 12. You are letting phone calls go to voicemail. You are watching your sister struggle and you are not lifting a finger. It is petty. Reagan, I thought you were bigger than that." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had watched me work 60-hour weeks for years and called it helping out. "I am not being petty. Mom," I said, "I am being an employee. Employees work their assigned hours. Owners work until the job is done. You made it very clear which one I am." "But we are family," she snapped. "Family does not fire family and call it a phase-out," I said. I walked past her. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently until the latch clicked. That night, I was sitting on my couch in my small apartment, eating a sandwich. I opened my personal laptop, not the work one, and checked my email. There was a message in my spam folder. I almost missed it. It was from a man named David Thorne. He was the regional director for a large logistics firm that we had worked with on a hospital project 2 years ago. I remembered him. He was rigorous, demanding, and fair. He was the kind of guy who appreciated that I color-coded my spreadsheets. Subject rumors, Reagan. "I heard through the grapevine that there is some restructuring happening at Iron Hollow. I know your family runs the place, but I also know who actually ran that hospital project. If you are looking to make a move, or if you decide to hang out your own shingle, give me a call. I have a mess of a warehouse in Tulsa that needs a brain like yours. Best, David." I stared at the screen. "A brain like yours." My mother said I was only good with my hands. David Thorne thought I had a brain. I did not reply immediately. I did not want to trigger any non-compete clauses that I might have inadvertently signed in the past, though I was pretty sure I had not signed anything binding recently, but I saved the email. I created a new folder on my personal drive. I named it Options, for the first time since the graduation dinner. The tight knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. I realized that Iron Hollow was not the world. It was just a small, dusty box, and I had the key to get out. I was just about to close the laptop and go to bed when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was late, 9:30 at night. I looked at the screen. Dad. I let it ring twice. Dad never called me at night. Usually, if he needed something after hours, he would text me a demand like, "Need the file for the Jones account," or "Call the alarm company." "Code isn't working." I picked it up. "Hello, Reagan." His voice was different. It was not the authoritative voice of the CEO. It was not the dismissive voice of the father who told me to sacrifice. It was tight, breathless, the sound of a man who had just looked over the edge of a cliff and saw no bottom. "Dad." "What is it?" I asked. There was a lot of background noise, voices, the sound of paper being shuffled frantically. "You need to come back to the shop," he stammered. "Right now." I frowned. "Dad, it is 9:30. I am in my pajamas. What is going on?" Can't it wait until morning? No, he barked. And then his voice cracked. No, it cannot wait. He lowered his voice, and I could hear the fear bleeding through the receiver. Northline just called. The retail group. They are on a conference line. They want answers about the rollout schedule for the 50-store expansion. Northline was our whale. They were 40% of our annual revenue. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said slowly. So let Sloan handle it. She is the face of the company, right? Dad's silence was deafening. It lasted for 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. She doesn't know the answers. Reagan, he whispered, she is freezing up. They are asking technical questions about the installation tolerances. They are asking about the supply chain integration. I closed my eyes. I could see it. I could see Sloan holding the phone, terrified. While the executives at Northline tore her apart with simple questions. Tell them you will get back to them tomorrow. I said. I tried, Dad said. They said no. They said they need to speak to the project lead immediately or they are pulling the contract. They asked for you by name. Reagan. I sat there in my quiet apartment. I looked at the email from David Thorne on my screen. If you decide to hang out your own shingle. They asked for me, I repeated. Yes, please. Just get down here. We can fix this. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights. I am not coming to save you. Dad, I thought, but then I realized something. If I went down there, I would not be saving them. I would be exposing them. I would be walking into that room not as a subordinate, but as the only person who held the oxygen mask. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said, and I hung up before he could say thank you. I pulled my car into the empty lot of iron hollow fixtures. The sodium vapor lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the asphalt. My father's truck was there, parked crookedly across 2 spaces. My mother's SUV was there. Sloan's convertible was there. The whole family was gathered. But it was not for a holiday. It was for an autopsy. I walked through the side door, the one that led directly to the administrative wing. The silence of the machine shop was heavy. Usually, this place felt alive to me, vibrating with potential. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. I walked up the metal stairs, my boots clanging softly against the grate, a rhythm that used to sound like purpose but now sounded like an intrusion. I found them in the main conference room. It was a glass-walled fishbowl that overlooked the silent factory floor. We had built the conference table ourselves 3 years ago, a massive slab of live-edge walnut that I had personally sanded for 12 hours to get the grain to pop. Now, my family sat around it like a council of war that had already lost the battle. Boxes of takeout Chinese food were scattered on the table, unopened and cold. The smell of grease and soy sauce mixed unpleasantly with the stale air conditioning. Dad was pacing by the whiteboard. His tie was loosened, and his hair was a mess. Mom was sitting with her back straight, tapping a pen against the walnut surface, a nervous tick I had not seen since the recession of 2008. Sloan was slumped in the corner chair, looking less like a CEO and more like a child who had broken a vase. They all looked up when I entered. Thank God. Dad breathed out. He looked 10 years older than he had at my graduation dinner. Reagan, come in. Sit down. I did not sit down. I stood at the end of the table, keeping my distance. You said Northline called. I said, my voice was steady. I was surprised by how calm I felt. It was the calm of someone who has nothing left to lose. Dad stopped pacing. He wiped a layer of sweat from his forehead. They are threatening to pull the contract. Reagan, the entire expansion project, 50 stores. Why, I asked. The documents are in the system. I uploaded the CAD files. I uploaded the load-bearing calculations. I even color-coded the installation guide. A first-year engineering student could follow those plans. Dad grimaced. He looked at Sloan, then back at me. It is not the plans, Reagan. It is the interpretation. They had some technical concerns about the seismic bracing for the California locations. I nodded slowly. Seismic bracing. I had spent 3 weeks researching California code requirements for that specific project, so tell them to reference Section 4, Paragraph B of the proposal. I said, it is all there. We told them that Sloan burst out. Her voice was shrill. She sat up, her eyes red-rimmed. I told them the file was there. I told them to just read the PDF. And I asked, and they said they did not want to read a PDF. Sloane spat. They wanted to discuss the sheer strength of the bolts with the person who selected them. They asked me if we used grade 5 or grade 8 bolts. I looked at my sister. And what did you say? Sloane hesitated. She looked down at the table. I said we used the best ones available. I almost laughed. It was a dark, humorless laugh that stayed trapped in my chest. Grade 8 Sloane. I said, we use grade 8 for seismic zones. Grade 5 shears off under lateral stress. If you put grade 5 bolts in a rack in Los Angeles and the ground shakes, the whole thing comes down on top of the customers. Sloane's face flushed pink. Well, I don't know that I am not a mechanic. Exactly, I said. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Stop it. Both of you, this is not the time for a lecture. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Reagan, look, they are on a break right now. The VP of Construction for Northline is calling back in 10 minutes. They explicitly asked for the technical lead. They want you? I walked over to the table. I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue folder. The same blue folder I had found in the filing cabinet. The ownership transfer. 12-month plan. I tossed it onto the walnut table. It landed with a heavy slap, sliding across the smooth wood until it hit the unopened carton of fried rice. You want the technical lead? I asked. I pointed at the folder. According to this, the technical lead is a redundancy. According to this, I am just the help. Mom stopped tapping her pen. She looked at the folder, then at me. Her expression hardened. Reagan, put that away. We are dealing with a crisis. This is the crisis. Mom, I said. I looked around the room. I looked at the three of them. When were you going to tell me? Really? Mom sighed. She adjusted the cuffs of her blouse. We have been over this. It is a business decision. We needed to modernize the leadership. It is not personal. Not personal, I repeated. You mapped out my termination date. You have a spreadsheet row that calculates how much money you save by firing me. Sloane rolled her eyes. You are being so dramatic. Reagan, nobody is firing you tomorrow. You have a whole year to transition. Transition, I said. You mean train you? You mean teach you how to not kill people with cheap bolts? Sloane stood up. I am the CEO, Reagan. I have a vision for this company that goes beyond nuts and bolts. Your vision is going to get us sued for negligence. I shot back. Stop, Dad roared. The room fell silent. Dad took a deep breath. He looked defeated. Reagan, please. This accounted is 40% of our revenue. 40%. If Northline walks, we cannot make payroll next month. We cannot pay the mortgage on the building. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. For years. That look would have been enough to make me jump into the fire. For years. The idea of the family failing was my worst nightmare. But tonight, I looked at him and I saw a man who had gambled my life away and lost. If it is 40% of the revenue, I said quietly, then why is the person who secures it listed as phase out? Why is the person who cannot tell the difference between a bolt and a screw listed as owner? Dad opened his mouth to answer, but the phone in the center of the table buzzed. It was a sleek, black conference phone. The little green light blinked. The display read Northline Retail Group, incoming call. The air left the room. Dad stared at the phone like it was a bomb. He looked at me. Reagan, he whispered, just this once. Please, pick it up. Talk to them. Save the contract. We will figure out the rest later. I did not move. Dad looked at Mom. Mom looked at the phone, then at me. Reagan, answer the phone, Mom ordered. Her voice was tight. Do not be childish. I crossed my arms. I am not an employee authorized to negotiate contracts. I said, that is a CEO-level task. Dad let out a strangled sound. He lunged for the phone and pressed the speaker button. Hello, Grant Bennett here, he said, his voice cracking slightly. There was a pause. Then, a sharp, clear voice filled the room. It was not the friendly project manager we usually dealt with. It was Marcus Vance, the VP of Construction. I had never spoken to him directly, but I knew his reputation. He was a man who ate contractors for breakfast. Grant, Vance said, His tone was icy. "I am looking at the specs your team sent over for the Fresno distribution center." Yes, we have those right here," Dad said. Fumbling for papers he did not understand. "I am not interested in the papers." "Grant," Vance said. "I just got off the phone with my structural engineer. He has a question about the load distribution on the cantilever racks. He says your previous email claimed the uprights could handle 4,000 pounds per arm, but based on the steel gauge listed in the invoice, that is physically impossible." Dad froze. He looked at Sloan. Sloan looked at the ceiling. "Well, Dad stammered. "There might be a clerical error in the invoice." "There is no clerical error," Vance interrupted. "The error is that I am talking to a salesman when I need to be talking to an engineer. Where is Bennett? I am right here." "Mr. Vance?" Dad said. "Not you," Vance snapped. "The girl." The one who did the walkthrough in Tulsa last year. The one who caught the HVAC interference issue before we poured the concrete. "Reagan, is she there?" My name hung in the air. Dad looked at me. His eyes were wide. He was begging me with every muscle in his face. "Say something. Please." I stood there. I looked at the phone. I looked at the folder on the table that said I was worthless. "She is here," Dad said weakly. "Put her on," Vance commanded. "Now, or I'm voiding the contract clause for non-performance effective immediately." Dad pushed the phone toward me. It slid across the walnut table. "Reagan," he mouthed. "Please." I looked at the phone. I could save them. I could lean over. "Say hello, Mr. Vance. Explain that we used high-tensile steel that was not reflected on the standard invoice because it was a custom order, and explain the load calculations in 30 seconds. I could fix it. I could make the fear go away. But if I did that, tomorrow morning I would still be the phase-out. Tomorrow morning, Sloan would be the CEO who managed the crisis. Tomorrow morning, I would be back in the box. I looked at my father. "If I talked to him," I said, my voice low enough that only the family could hear, but loud enough to be crystal clear. "Does the plan change?" Dad blinked. "We can discuss it. We will talk about a bonus. A raise." I shook my head. "Not a bonus. The plan. The ownership. Does it change?" Mom hissed. "This is blackmail." Reagan. "It is negotiation." I said, "Mr. Vance is waiting," Dad whispered frantically. I waited. Dad looked at the phone. He looked at the 40% of his revenue that was about to evaporate. "We will talk about it." "Okay, I promise." Dad said, Just handle this." I looked at him. "We will talk about it." The same thing he said when I asked for a salary. The same thing he said when I asked for a title. "We will talk about it." It was a lie. It was always a lie. I looked at the phone. I leaned down. I pressed the mute button so Vance could not hear us. "No," I said. Dad's jaw dropped. What I said, no. I repeated. I stepped back from the table. "I am not the technical lead. I am the transition support. And according to my job description, which you wrote, I am not qualified to make high-level engineering decisions. That requires a head, not just hands," Reagan Sloan screamed. "You are ruining everything. You ruined it," I shouted back, my voice finally rising, echoing off the glass walls. "You ruined it when you decided I was disposable. You ruined it when you thought you could run a technical business on charisma and vibes." Grant Vance's voice barked from the speaker. "Are you there?" Dad looked at me. He saw the wall I had built. He saw that for the first time in 24 years, his daughter was not going to clean up the mess. He unmuted the phone. His hand was shaking. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice trembling. "Reagan is unavailable at the moment, but I assure you." "Don't assure me anything." Vance cut him off. "You have until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to get me a technical verification signed by a qualified project lead, or Northline is out. Do you hear me? We are out." Click. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed in the silent room. Dad sank into his chair. He put his head in his hands. Mom stared at me. Her face was pale, her lips a thin white line. "How could you?" she whispered. "How could you do this to your family?" I picked up my bag. I picked up the blue folder from the table. "I did not do this." "Mom," I said. I tapped the folder. "This did? You wrote the script. I am just reading my lines. Sloane was crying now. Soft, panicked sobs. What are we going to do? She whimpered. I do not know how to calculate the load. I do not know what he is talking about. Dad looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation that I had never seen before. You fix this, Reagan, he growled. You fix this or what I asked. You will fire me. I held up the folder. You already did. I turned around and walked toward the door. My heart was hammering in my chest like a piston engine, but my hands, my skilled hands, were perfectly steady. Where are you going? Mom called out. I am going home, I said without looking back. I have to be in at 8 o'clock tomorrow. I do not want to be late for my phase-out. I walked out of the conference room, down the metal stairs, and out into the night air. The parking lot was still yellow and sickly, but the air tasted different. It tasted cold. It tasted sharp. It tasted like leverage. As I got into my car, I looked back at the office window. I could see them arguing. I could see Sloane waving her arms. I could see Dad slumped over the table. They had 12 hours to figure out that you cannot inherit competence, and I had 12 hours to figure out exactly what my price was going to be. The email from Northline Retail Group arrived at 9 o'clock the next morning. It did not come with a bang or a shout. It arrived with a soft digital chime that sounded absurdly cheerful given the devastation it carried. I was at my desk, organizing the digital files for the handover, when I heard Dad gasp in his office. It was a sound like someone had been punched in the gut sharp, sudden, and followed by a long, wheezing silence. I did not need to ask what it was. I could see the subject line on my own screen, as I was still copied on the project correspondence. Subject notice of contract suspension. Project expansion, Phase 2. I opened it. The text was brief, brutal, and written in the kind of corporate legal language that leaves no room for argument. Dear Mr. Bennett, due to unresolved concerns regarding technical continuity and the lack of a designated qualified project lead, Northline Retail Group is exercising its right to suspend all activities on the 50-store expansion effective immediately. We require a full audit of your project management structure before we can proceed. It was not a cancellation, it was a suspension. But in the construction world, a suspension is a death sentence. It means cash flow stops. It means materials sit in the warehouse gathering dust. It means the bank starts asking why the accounts receivable column has suddenly gone to zero. My phone vibrated on the desk. I looked down. It was a text message. Not from Dad. Not from Mom. It was from Marcus Vance's number, the vice president at Northline, who had screamed at my father the night before. I picked it up. Reagan, this is not about the brand. We trust you. We do not trust the new process. If you are not steering the ship, we are not getting on board. Let me know if the situation changes. I stared at the screen. We trust you. For 7 years, I had chased that validation from my parents. I had worked until my fingers bled and my eyes burned, desperate for them to look at me and say, "We trust you." They never did. Instead, I got it from a man in a hard hat 3 states away who had only met me twice. The door to my office flew open. Dad stood there. He was pale, his skin the color of old parchment. He was holding a printout of the email, crumpling it in his fist. "You saw it," he said. His voice was hoarse. I nodded. "I saw it. Fix it. Reagan," he pleaded, "call Vance back. Tell him you are the lead. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. We can fix the paperwork later." I turned my chair to face him. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a movie I had already seen. "I cannot do that." "Dad," I said calmly. "Why not?" he shouted. He stepped into the room, waving the paper. "Do you want to destroy us? Do you want to see this place shut down? I want you to honor the plan you wrote." I said. I pointed to the ownership transfer document that was still sitting on the corner of my desk. "You said Sloane is the future. You said I am the past. If you want Northline to trust the future, let the future talk to them." Dad slammed his hand against the door frame. "Reagan, this is not a game. This is $4 million, and I am a phase-out, I snapped back, my voice rising for the first time that morning. You cannot have it both ways. Dad, you cannot tell me I am worthless on paper and then tell me I am essential in practice. Mom appeared behind him. She looked impeccable as always, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were cold. This is cruel. Reagan, she said. Her voice was low and dripping with disappointment. I raised you better than this. Family does not hold family hostage. I looked at my mother, the woman who had told me, to my face, that I lacked the intellect for leadership. Family does not steal a decade of labor and then hand the rewards to someone else because they look better in a brochure. I said, Mom stiffened, we are not stealing anything. We are positioning the company for growth. Sloan has the energy. She has the modern touch. Then let her use her modern touch to get the suspension lifted. I said, I turned back to my computer. I have work to do. I said, I have to finish cataloging the inventory for the transition. I want to make sure the records are perfect for Sloan when she takes over fully. I ignored them. I typed on my keyboard, the clicking sound filling the silence. Eventually, they left. I heard them arguing in the hall. I heard Sloan crying in her office. But I did not leave. I did not storm out. I stayed. I stayed because of the guys downstairs. At lunch, I went down to the shop floor. The rumor mill was already spinning. The machines were running, but the energy was off. Men were huddled in small groups, talking in hushed tones. When they saw me, they went silent. Marcus, the foreman, walked over to me. He looked worried. Reagan, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Is it true? Did Northline pull the plug? I looked at him. I looked at the 20 men working in the shop, men with mortgages, with kids in college, with truck payments. If I walked away completely, right now, the chaos upstairs would filter down here within a week. Payroll would be missed. Orders would be mixed up. It is just a pause. Marcus, I lied. Just some administrative stuff. Do not worry about it. Keep the line moving on the hospital job. Marcus looked at me. He knew I was lying, but he also knew I was trying to protect them. You are a good kid. Reagan, he said quietly, you deserved better than this. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Just keep cutting. Marcus. That afternoon, Sloan tried to fix it. I could hear it happening through the thin walls. She had set up a video conference with the Northline procurement team, not Vance, but his subordinates. She was trying to bypass the executive level and get the project moving from the bottom up. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, but I did not turn on any music. I just listened. Hi, everyone. I heard Sloan's voice, bright and overly enthusiastic. So, we are so excited to get these fixtures rolling. I just wanted to touch base on the timeline. There was a pause. I could imagine the faces on the other end of the screen. Then, a voice from the speakerphone, muffled but audible. Ms. Bennett, we have a question about the installation sequence. Your new schedule has the electrical rough-in happening after the cabinetry installation. That is backward. If we do that, we have to drill through the finished veneer to run the conduit. I closed my eyes. It was a rookie mistake, a scheduling 101 error. Oh, Sloan said, her voice faltering. Well, we thought it would be cleaner to install the cabinets first so we know exactly where the outlets go. That is not how it works, the voice said, sounding irritated. Reagan always had the electrical mapped out 3 weeks in advance. She sent us the overlay files. Do you have the overlay files? Silence. Ms. Bennett. I can look for them. Sloan stammered. Look, the voice said. And this time I recognized it. It was a junior project manager named Dave. No offense. But Reagan designed this entire installation protocol. She knows the site conditions better than our own guys. Is she there? Can we just get her on the line to clarify the conduit path? I waited. I waited for my father to step in. I waited for my mother to defend her vision. Instead, I heard Dad's voice, sounding defeated. Reagan is occupied with other duties. He said, then we are occupied too. Dave said, we will wait for the audit. Have a good day. The call ended. 10 minutes later, Dad walked into my office. He did not yell. He did not plead. He just sat down in the visitor chair and looked at the floor. He looked broken. For the first time, the illusion was shattering. He was realizing that the legacy he talked about was not the name on the building or the logo on the truck. It was the competence that got the job done. And he had just spent 12 months planning to fire that competence. "They only want you," he whispered. "It is not the company. It is you." I stopped typing. I looked at him. "They want the person who does the work." "Dad," I said, "that is how business works. You pay for value. You do not pay for potential. You do not pay for an image." Dad looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I thought he started, then stopped. I thought I was doing the right thing. For Sloan. She needs a win. Reagan. She has always struggled to find her thing. You have always been strong. You can survive anything. I thought you would be okay. I felt a flash of anger so hot it almost burned. "So because I am strong, I get punished," I asked. "Because I work hard, I get to be the stepping stone for her." "That is your logic." Dad rubbed his face. "It is not like that. It is exactly like that." I said. Mom walked in then. She had clearly been listening. She did not look broken. She looked furious. "She is your sister." "Reagan," Mom snapped. "You are supposed to help her. You are supposed to support the family." "I am supporting the family," I said. "I kept this place running for 7 years. I earned every dime that paid for her degree, her car, and that dress she is wearing. And my reward is a folder that says, 'Phase out.'" Mom shook her head. She walked over to the desk and leaned in close. "Let us be honest. Reagan," she said. Her voice was cold and hard. "You are good at the grit. You are good at the dirt. But you are not a face. You do not have the polish. Sloan has the polish. That is why she is the CEO. Management is her birthright. Labor is yours." There it was, the naked truth. She did not care about the suspension. She did not care about the money. She cared about the caste system she had built inside her own house. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and I realized I did not know her at all. I stood up slowly. I picked up my bag. "If I am just a pair of hands—" "Mom," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "Then do not call me when the company needs a head." I walked past her. I walked out of the office, down the stairs, and through the shop. I nodded to Marcus as I passed. He lifted his welding mask and gave me a sad salute. I drove home in silence. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the plains of Oklahoma. I felt drained, empty. I pulled into the driveway of my apartment complex. I checked my mailbox out of habit. There was a single envelope inside. It was from First Horizon Bank. I frowned. My personal account was with a credit union. I did not bank with First Horizon. I tore the envelope open as I walked up the stairs to my apartment. I pulled out the letter. It was not a credit card offer. It was not a promotion. It was a notice of default on covenant. I stopped on the landing. I read the text, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. "Dear Ms. Bennett, this letter is to inform you that the business line of credit for Iron Hollow fixtures, for which you are listed as the primary personal guarantor, is currently under review due to irregular reporting patterns. As the guarantor, you are personally liable for the outstanding balance of $450,000 if the corporate entity fails to meet its debt service coverage ratio." I froze. Primary personal guarantor. I had never signed a guarantee. I had never agreed to put my name on a $500,000 debt. I read the letter again. The date on the reference contract was from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when I was 21, when I was just a helper, my hands started to shake. Not from the vibration of a sander, from rage. They had not just fired me. They had not just used me for labor. They had used my name to mortgage their future. They had anchored a sinking ship to my ankle without even telling me I was in the water. I looked at the letter. I looked at the signature line on the copy of the contract attached to the back. Reagan Bennett. It looked like my signature. It was a good forgery. Or maybe it was one of those papers Dad had slid across the desk during a busy morning, saying, "Just sign this. It is for the insurance update." I unlocked my apartment door and threw my bag on the floor. I walked to the kitchen counter and placed the letter down. I stared at it. The sadness was gone. The hurt was gone. The desire to teach them a lesson was gone. Now, it was war. They wanted to talk about business. They wanted to talk about ownership, fine. I picked up my phone. I did not call Dad. I did not call Northline. I searched for a number I had not used in a long time. The number for the only lawyer in town who hated my father almost as much as I did right now. I dialed. "It is Reagan Bennett." I said when the voice answered, "I need to sue my parents." I sat at my kitchen island with the letter from First Horizon Bank spread out in front of me. The paper was high quality, heavy and textured, the kind of stationery used to deliver very bad news in a very polite way. I read the paragraph again, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. As the primary personal guarantor liable for the outstanding balance of $450,000. $450,000. The number did not feel real. It was a mortgage on a house I did not own. It was a lifetime of savings I did not have. It was a chain around my neck that weighed nearly $500,000. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. My heart was doing that frantic hammering thing again, knocking against my ribs like a bird trapped in a box. I needed to think. I needed to use the head my mother said I was not good at using. I had never walked into a bank and asked for a loan of that size. I had never sat across from a loan officer and signed a promissory note. So how was my name on this? I stood up and walked to my bookshelf. I pulled down an old box where I kept my personal records. I dug through it until I found my laptop, not the work one, but my personal one. I sat back down and opened my email archive. I searched for the date referenced in the bank letter. October 14th, 3 years ago. I was 21 then. I was in my junior year of college, working full-time at the shop during the day and taking classes at night. I remembered that autumn. It was the year we landed the contract with the regional hospital network. The shop was chaotic. We were expanding, buying new materials, upgrading the ventilation system. I scrolled through the emails from that week. Subject lunch order. Subject class cancellation. Subject urgent. Payroll and insurance docs. I stopped. I clicked on the email from my father, Reagan. "Need you to sign these payroll updates and the new health insurance riders for the crew. Also some tax compliance stuff for the new fiscal year. I printed them out. They are on your desk. Sign them before the courier comes at 2 o'clock. Thanks, Dad." I closed my eyes, and the memory washed over me. I could see the moment perfectly. It was a Tuesday. I was running late for a lecture on supply chain logistics. I had rushed into the office, grabbing my backpack. Dad was standing there, holding a stack of papers clipped together. "Just here, here, and here," he had said, flipping the pages for me. "It is just standard compliance stuff, so we can keep the guys insured." I had trusted him. I had signed where his finger pointed. I had signed quickly, my scrawl messy and hurried, because I did not want to miss my class. I opened the attachment on the bank letter again. I looked at the signature on the commercial guarantee agreement. It was my signature. It was messy. It was hurried. And it was right next to a clause that stated I was pledging my personal assets present and future to secure the debts of Iron Hollow fixtures. I felt a coldness spread through my stomach that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the chill of absolute clarity. They had not just used me for labor. They had not just stolen my career. They had turned me into a human shield. If the company failed, if Sloan ran it into the ground, which she was currently doing, the bank would not just take the machines. They would not just take the building. They would come for me. They would garnish my future wages. They would seize any assets I acquired. They would ruin my credit score for a decade. My parents had built a trapdoor under my feet 3 years ago, and they had been smiling the whole time. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of the only person in Riverton who terrified my father, Arthur Caldwell. Caldwell was a civil litigation attorney who operated out of a small brick building on the edge of downtown. He was not the type of lawyer who had billboards on the highway. He was the type of lawyer other lawyers hired when they got into trouble. He was expensive. He was ruthless. and he had a well-known distaste for the good old boys club that my father desperately tried to be part of. I got an appointment for 8 o'clock the next morning. I walked into his office carrying the blue folder and the bank letter. The office smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco. Caldwell was sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been carved out of a single tree trunk. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that looked like flint. He did not offer me coffee. He pointed to the chair. "Talk," he said. I laid it all out. I told him about the graduation. I told him about the ownership transfer plan. I told him about the phase-out, and then I slid the bank letter across the desk. "They want to fire me," I said, keeping my voice level. "But they have my name on the debt." Caldwell put on his reading glasses. He read the letter. He read it slowly, his face impassive. Then he picked up the transfer plan. He flipped through the pages, humming softly to himself. After 10 minutes, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "This is a very interesting piece of architecture, Ms. Bennett," he said. His voice was dry, like rustling leaves. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means your parents are not just mean," he said. "They are desperate. And they are clever, in a clumsy sort of way." He tapped the bank letter. "Do you know why they have not fired you yet? Why they created this 12-month phase-out period?" "Because they want me to train Sloan," I said. "No," Caldwell said. He shook his head. "That is the story they tell you. The reality is this covenant." He turned the paper around so I could see the paragraph he was pointing to, Key Person Clause. I read it. "The continued involvement of Reagan Bennett in a management capacity is a condition of this credit facility. Any change in the employment status of the guarantor must be reported to the lender immediately and may result in a review of the interest rate or a call on the loan." I stared at the words. "They cannot fire you," Caldwell said simply. "If they fire you, or if you quit, the bank gets nervous. The bank knows your father is, let us say, flexible with the truth. The bank knows Sloan has no track record. You are the collateral. Reagan, you are the reason the bank feels safe lending them $500,000. My mouth went dry. "So they keep me for 12 months, I whispered. "Exactly," Caldwell said. "They keep you for 12 months, just long enough to refinance the loan or transfer the assets into a new holding company that is not attached to this debt. Then, once the money is moved, they cut you loose, and you are left holding the bag for the old shell company." I felt sick. It was premeditated. It was a long con, and the mark was their own daughter. "What do?" I asked. "Do I sue them for fraud?" I did not know what I was signing. Caldwell leaned back in his chair. He tented his fingers. "We could try," he said. "But proving you did not read a document you signed is difficult. The law assumes you are competent. If we sue for fraud now, it blows everything up. The bank calls the loan. The company goes bankrupt. Your parents lose everything. But so do you, because that guarantee is still valid until a judge says otherwise, and that could take years. So I am trapped?" I asked. "No," Caldwell said. A small, sharp smile touched his lips. "You are not trapped. You are informed, and that is a very different thing." He opened a drawer and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Rule number 1, he said. "Stop reacting. Start collecting. I want you to go back there. I want you to be the model employee, but I want you to document everything." He wrote on the pad. 1. Archive every text message, email, and voicemail from your parents that mentions sacrifice, family duty, or future rewards. We need to build a pattern of undue influence. 2. Get a copy of the full credit agreement from the bank. Use your authority as the guarantor to request it directly. Do not ask your father. 3. Find the operating agreement for the company. I frowned. "The operating agreement. You mean the bylaws?" Caldwell nodded. "Iron Hollow is an LLC. Correct?" "Yes. Then there is an operating agreement," he said. "It dictates how decisions are made, how shares are transferred, and what happens when an owner dies or retires. Your father thinks he can just hand the company to Sloan because he is the dad, but the law might say something different." He paused. He looked at me with a strange intensity. "Tell me about the history. Reagan, did your father start this company?" "No." I said, "My grandfather started it. Dad took over in 2005 when Grandpa died. And your grandmother?" "She died a year later." Caldwell made a note on his pad. He circled it twice. "Did you ever see your grandfather's will?" he asked. I shook my head. I was a kid. I was 14. I just knew everything went to Dad and Mom. Caldwell leaned forward. His eyes were gleaming now. "Reagan, I knew your grandfather," he said. "I did some work for him back in the 90s. He was a hard man, a meticulous man. He did not trust easily, and he certainly did not trust your father's business acumen." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that men like your grandfather do not leave their legacy unprotected," Caldwell said. "They usually put in safeguards, trusts, conditions, clauses that prevent the next generation from squandering the fortune." He tore the sheet off the legal pad and handed it to me. "Your parents are acting like they own 100% of that company," he said. "But if they are hiding a debt guarantee from you, what else are they hiding?" I looked at the list of tasks. It felt like a mission. "I want you to find your grandfather's estate documents," Caldwell said. "If they are not at the house, check the county records, or check the safe in the office." He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "Go back to work. Reagan," he said, "let them think they have won. Let them think you are scared of the debt. But find those papers, because if there is something your grandparents left you, your parents might have buried it deep." I walked out of Caldwell's office into the bright morning sunlight. The world looked the same, but it had changed completely. I drove to the shop. I walked in at 9:30. The atmosphere was tense. Dad was on the phone in his office, shouting at a supplier. Sloan was in the conference room with the door shut, probably hiding from the Northline fallout. I walked to my desk. I sat down. I opened my email. I saw a message from Mom, sent at midnight. "Reagan, please be reasonable. We are a family. We can work this out. Just come in tomorrow and help your sister. We can talk about a salary adjustment." Salary adjustment. They were still trying to buy me off with peanuts while they held a $500,000 gun to my head. I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to a new address I had just created, Evidence Proton Mail, com. Then I stood up and walked to the wall of filing cabinets in the main hallway. These were the old files, the dusty ones, the ones nobody touched because everything important was supposed to be digital now. I found the drawer marked Corporate, Formation. It was locked. I looked around. Nobody was watching. The receptionist was on a break. Dad was still yelling. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my keyring. On it was a small brass key that I had kept since I was 16. It was the master key for the physical archives. Dad had given it to me years ago when he wanted me to clean out the storage room, and he had probably forgotten I still had it. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I pulled the drawer open. The smell of old paper and mildew drifted up. I flipped past the tax returns from the 90s. I flipped past the original lease agreements. I found a thick, leather-bound binder at the very back. The spine read Iron Hollow Fixtures, Operating Agreement Trust Documents, 2005. 2005. The year Grandpa died. I pulled it out. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from anticipation. I opened it to the first page. I scanned the preamble. Then I turned to the section on succession and voting rights. There was a paragraph highlighted in yellow marker. The ink was faded, but the words were legible. Article 7.3, Conditional Transfer of Voting Shares. Upon the death of the founder, management control shall pass to the trustee Grant Bennett. However, full voting rights and 51% of the equity shall be held in trust until such time as the founder's eldest grandchild completes a university degree or reaches the age of 26, whichever comes first. I stopped breathing. Eldest grandchild. That was me. I read the next sentence. At which time, said 51% of voting interest shall revert automatically to the eldest grandchild to ensure the preservation of the company's operational integrity. I read it again and again. My parents did not own the company. They were just babysitting it. They were stewards. And the moment I walked across that stage and grabbed my diploma, their stewardship had expired. They knew. They had to know. That was why they were rushing the transfer to Sloan. That was why they were trying to force me out. That was why they had hidden the operating agreement in the back of a locked drawer. They were not just trying to fire me. They were trying to steal my inheritance before I knew it existed. I closed the binder. I slipped it into my large tote bag. I stood up and locked the drawer. I walked back to my desk. I sat down and looked through the glass wall at my father. He was rubbing his temples, looking stressed and exhausted. He looked like a man who was fighting a war on two fronts and losing both. He thought he was fighting Northline. He had no idea that the real enemy was sitting 20 feet away, holding the deed to his kingdom in her bag. I picked up my phone and texted Caldwell. I found it. You were right. Section 7.3. I own 51%. I put the phone down. I watched Sloan walk out of the conference room. She looked frazzled. She saw me and forced a tight, fake smile. "Morning, Reagan," she said. "Glad you decided to show up. We have a lot of work to do to fix this mess with Northline." I looked at her. I looked at the CEO who was standing on a floor she did not own, giving orders to a woman she could not fire. "Yes, Sloan," I said, allowing myself a small, genuine smile. "We certainly do." I opened a blank document on my screen. I typed a new header, Iron Hollow Fixtures, Notice of Emergency Board Meeting. It was time to introduce my family to the real boss. The law offices of Henderson Associates were located in a red brick building that smelled of old money and furniture polish. It was the kind of place where the carpet was thick enough to silence your footsteps, and the secretaries looked at you over the rims of their glasses as if you were trespassing on sacred ground. I walked in with the leather-bound binder I had taken from the locked drawer at Iron Hollow, tucked firmly under my arm. It felt heavy, like I was carrying a loaded weapon. I did not have an appointment. When I told the receptionist I needed to see Mr. Henderson regarding the estate of Franklin Bennett, she tried to wave me away. She told me Mr. Henderson was in a deposition. She told me to leave a message. She told me that my father handled all corporate matters. I looked at her. I placed the binder on her desk, right on top of her appointment calendar. "Tell him Reagan Bennett is here," I said. "Tell him I have the original operating agreement from 2005, and tell him I'm reading Article 7, Section 3. Her eyes flicked to the binder, then back to my face. She saw something there, perhaps the ghost of my grandfather, who had been a terrifying client, and she picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, I was sitting in Mr. Henderson's office. Mr. Henderson was a man who looked like he had been made out of dried apple skin and expensive tailoring. He did not look happy. He sat behind a desk that was cluttered with files, peering at me with a mixture of annoyance and caution. "Reagan," he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "It has been years. I was sorry to hear about the trouble with the Northline contract. Your father called me this morning. He's quite distressed." "I bet he is," I said. I did not sit down. I opened the binder. I turned to the page with the yellow highlighter. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I want to clarify the legal standing of the current ownership transfer plan my parents are attempting to execute. Specifically, the transfer of 100% of the voting shares to my sister, Sloan." Henderson sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Reagan, look, corporate restructuring is complex. Your parents are trying to modernize the company. They have the right to organize the management team as they see fit. Do they?" I asked. I pushed the binder across the desk. I pointed to the paragraph. Article 7.3 Conditional Transfer of Voting Shares. Henderson looked at the page. He did not read it. He did not have to. He knew exactly what it said. He had written it. My grandfather did not trust my father to run this business alone. Did he? I asked. Henderson stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Your grandfather was a man who believed in checks and balances," Henderson said carefully. "He loved your father, but he believed that Grant lacked a certain, how did he phrase it, grit. He worried that without a strong operational hand, the company would drift, so he created a trigger." I said. Henderson nodded slowly. "The trust stipulates that the majority voting interest, 51%, is held in a suspended state, managed by your father as trustee. he explained. That suspension remains until the eldest grandchild, that is, you completes a 4-year university degree or reaches the age of 26. And once that condition is met, I asked, the shares vest automatically, he said. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. So, I said, my voice quiet. The moment I walked across that stage last week, I became the majority owner of Iron Hollow Fixtures. Technically, yes, Henderson said. However, there are formalities, papers to be filed. Your father was supposed to initiate the transfer, but he didn't. I said. Instead, he drew up a plan to transfer everything to Sloan. He tried to rewrite the company structure before the bank or the state realized the trigger event had occurred. Henderson looked uncomfortable. He started shuffling papers on his desk. Your father felt that well. He felt that the spirit of the agreement was about competence. He believes Sloan represents the future. He was trying to protect the asset. He was trying to steal it. Mr. Henderson, I said, and you were helping him draft the paperwork. Henderson bristled. I was acting on the instructions of the current CEO. Until you assert your claim, Grant is the trustee. I am asserting it now. I said. I pulled a document out of my bag. It was a formal demand letter that Arthur Caldwell had drafted for me an hour ago. I require full access to the corporate books. I said, I require a freeze on all asset transfers. And I require a formal acknowledgement of my 51% stake to be sent to our lenders within 24 hours. Henderson looked at the letter. He looked at me. He realized that the girl who used to sit in the waiting room coloring with crayons while her grandfather signed wills was gone. If you do this, Reagan, he said softly, you declare war on your parents. They will fight you. They will argue that the degree condition implies a degree relevant to the business, or they will challenge your competency. It will get ugly. It is already ugly. I said, they put my name on a $500,000 debt without my consent. That is not family. Mr. Henderson, that is fraud. I turned to leave. File the papers, I said, or my next visit will be with the State Ethics Board regarding your role in hiding a trust beneficiary's rights. I walked out of the office. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure adrenaline. I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at the steering wheel. The puzzle pieces had finally snapped together. The phase-out plan was not just about cruelty, it was about panic. My parents knew the date of my graduation was a ticking bomb. They knew that once I had that degree, the company was legally mine. They had to get rid of me. They had to strip me of my role, make me sign away my rights, or transfer the assets to a new entity under Sloan's name before I found out about the trust. Mom's words echoed in my head. You are just good with your hands. It was a lie. They knew I was good with my head. That was exactly what they were afraid of. They were afraid that if I took power, I would run the business the way Grandpa did, with discipline, with austerity, and without the flashy, expensive branding exercises that Mom and Sloan loved so much. I took a deep breath. I had the leverage. I had the law. But I also had a problem. A legal battle would take months, maybe years. In the meantime, Iron Hollow was bleeding. The Northline contract was suspended. The cash flow was drying up. If I spent 6 months fighting for the crown, I would inherit a kingdom of ash. I needed to save the business, but I could not save it for them. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had saved the night before. Marcus Vance. The phone rang 3 times. This is Vance, he barked. Mr. Vance, this is Reagan Bennett. I said. There was a pause. Then, his tone shifted. It was still gruff, but less hostile. I thought you were unavailable, he said. That is what your father told me. My father is managing a transition. I said carefully. I am calling to ask you a hypothetical question. I am listening. If the contract with Northline were to be managed by a different entity, I said, an entity where I am the sole signatory, where I hold the license, and where I control the quality assurance directly, would you lift the suspension? Vance was silent for a moment. I could hear the sound of construction machinery in the background on his end. Reagan, I do not care what name is on the invoice, he said. I care about the bolts. I care about the schedule. If you tell me you are the one signing off on the load calculations, and if you can show me you have the insurance and the bonding capacity, I will sign the change order today. We need this project moving. But, he added, his voice dropping a decibel, I cannot get involved in a family lawsuit. If you bring me drama, I walk. You understand? I understand. I said, clean break, no drama, just work. Good, he said. Send me your credentials. I hung up. I did not go back to Iron Hollow. I drove to the Secretary of State's website on my phone. I sat in that parking lot for an hour. I filled out the forms. I paid the $50 filing fee with my personal credit card. Entity name Bennett Works Project Services, LLC, Manager Reagan Bennett, address my apartment address. I was not just claiming my inheritance, I was building a lifeboat. If my parents wanted to burn Iron Hollow to the ground with their incompetence, I would let them. But I would not let them burn the contracts. I would not let them burn the reputation I had built. I started making calls. I called the insurance broker, the one Dad had sent me to find the file for in the first place. I asked about a bonding line for a new LLC. He knew me. He knew I ran the shop. He gave me a quote within 20 minutes. Then I called the bank, not First Horizon, but the local credit union where I had my small savings account. I set up a business checking account. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Bennett Works was real. It existed on paper. It had a tax ID number. It was a shell. But it was my shell. Now came the hard part. I needed a crew. I could not install 50 stores by myself. I thought about Marcus. I thought about the guys on the floor. If I poached them, my father would sue me for tortious interference. He would claim I was stealing his workforce. I had to be smarter than that. I drove to the shop one last time. It was 5:15. The shift was ending. The guys were walking out to their trucks, carrying their lunchboxes. I parked across the street. I did not go onto the property. I waited until Marcus walked out. He saw my car. He hesitated, then walked over, looking over his shoulder to make sure Sloan was not watching from the window. Reagan, he said, leaning into my window, you missed a hell of a day. The mood in there is like a funeral home. Sloan was yelling at the suppliers all afternoon. She ordered the wrong laminate again. I nodded. I am sorry. Marcus, what are you doing here? He asked. I handed him a business card. I had printed it at the copy shop on my way over. It was simple. Just my name, my new LLC name, and my number. I am not asking you to quit. Marcus, I said, and I am not asking you to do anything that would get you in trouble. But if the day comes, and I think it is coming soon, where the paycheck bounces, or where the safety standards drop so low you do not feel safe working there, call me. Marcus looked at the card. He looked at the name, Bennett Works. He smiled. A slow, tired smile. You going independent? Boss, I am going legit, I said. And Marcus, if you guys come over, there are contracts. Real ones. Overtime is paid. Benefits are day one. No family favor nonsense. Just professional work. Marcus tucked the card into his shirt pocket. I will keep this close, he said. I have a feeling I'm going to need it before the week is out. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table. The sun had gone down. My apartment was dark, lit only by the glow of my laptop screen. I had the operating agreement scan from the binder. I had the registration for Bennett Works. I had the tentative verbal agreement from Northline. I was ready. I opened my email client. I typed the addresses of my father, my mother, and Sloan. I CC'd Arthur Caldwell and Mr. Henderson. Subject official notice of majority ownership, legal representation, Grant, Denise, and Sloan. Attached is a copy of the operating agreement for Iron Hollow fixtures, specifically Article 7.3, which confirms that as of my graduation date, 51% of the voting shares have vested in my name. Effective immediately, any transfer of assets, intellectual property, or client contracts without my express written consent is a violation of your fiduciary duty and will be met with legal action. Furthermore, regarding the personal guarantee you fraudulently assigned to me, Mr. Caldwell has initiated a formal dispute with the lender. If you attempt to default on this loan to damage my credit, I will petition the court to dissolve the company and liquidate assets to cover the debt. I am done being the safety net. I am done being the hands. From this point forward, all communication regarding Iron Hollow must be directed to my attorney. Do not call me. Do not come to my apartment. Reagan Bennett, owner, Bennett, Works Project Services, LLC, majority owner, Iron Hollow Fixtures. I hovered my finger over the send button. I thought about the family dinners. I thought about the Christmas mornings. I thought about the way my father used to look at me when I was 5 years old, before I became useful, before I became a tool. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Just one. I wiped it away. I hit send. The swoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox seemed to echo in the empty room. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. My phone started to buzz. Dad. I declined the call. It buzzed again. Mom. I declined the call. Then, a notification popped up on my laptop screen. A new post on social media. I clicked on it. It was Sloan. She had posted a photo on the official Iron Hollow Instagram page. It was a picture of the factory floor, looking gritty and industrial, a picture I had taken 3 years ago. The caption read, "It is sad when people you trust turn their backs on legacy. We are facing some sabotage from a disgruntled former employee who is trying to steal our clients and our history. But Iron Hollow is stronger than one person's greed. We will fight to protect our family business from hostile takeovers." Family first betrayal. Stay strong. I stared at the screen. Sabotage. Greed. She was spinning it. She was playing the victim card. She was going to try to turn the narrative against me before the legal reality set in. She was going to use the family brand to paint me as the villain who was trying to destroy them. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. They still didn't get it. They were fighting a PR war. They thought likes and comments would save them. But I was fighting a logistics war. And in my war, you don't win by posting pictures. You win by delivering the goods. Let her post. I whispered to the empty room. I turned off my phone, opened the schematics for the Northline project, and started to work. The war did not start with a subpoena. It started with a notification on my phone screen at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. Sloan had decided that if she could not beat me in the machine shop, she would beat me in the court of public opinion. I sat on the edge of my bed, coffee in hand, scrolling through the Iron Hollow official Instagram page. She had posted a black and white photo of our grandfather's original workbench. It was moody, artistic, and completely staged. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive storytelling. "It is a heavy heart day at Iron Hollow. We always believed that family was the steel that held this company together, but sometimes greed makes people lose their way. We are dealing with a betrayal from within someone who wants to tear down 40 years of legacy just to prove a point. But we will not break. We are Iron Hollow, legacy family, first resilience." Heartbroken. She did not name me. She did not have to. The comments were already rolling in from the local Riverton community. Oh my God. Sloan. Sending prayers. Is this about the sister I heard she was difficult? Stay strong. Girl. Don't let the haters ruin the business. I felt a spike of heat in my chest, a mix of embarrassment and rage. Riverton was a small town. By noon, everyone from the grocer to the gas station attendant would think I was the villain who tried to destroy her own family for a payout. I did not comment. I did not post a defensive status update. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder labeled defamation, and then I emailed it to Arthur Caldwell. Arthur, does this count as disparagement? His reply came 2 minutes later. It dances on the line. Do not engage. Let her keep talking. The more she speaks, the more rope she gives us. But the digital smear campaign was just the air cover. The ground war was happening in the shop. Around 10 o'clock, I received a text from one of the older fabricators, a man named Miller who had taught me how to use the lathe when I was 19. Reagan, your mom is walking the floor. She is telling the guys that you are trying to force a sale of the company to a private equity firm. She says if you win, we all get fired and the shop gets turned into condos. People are scared. I stared at the phone. It was a lie so bold, so calculated, that it took my breath away. They were weaponizing the crew's fear of unemployment against me. They knew I cared about those men. They knew that painting me as a corporate raider was the only way to break the loyalty I had built over 7 years. I texted Miller back, "Do not believe it. I am trying to save the jobs, not cut them. Just keep your head down." At noon, a courier arrived at my apartment door. He handed me a thick envelope from a law firm I did not recognize, probably a friend of my father's from the country club. It was a cease and desist order. "Dear Ms. Bennett, you are hereby ordered to cease all contact with Northline Retail Group and any other clients of Iron Hollow Fixtures. Your actions constitute tortious interference and the theft of trade secrets. If you continue to solicit our clients, we will seek damages in excess of $1 million. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound in the empty apartment. Trade secrets. The secret was that I knew how to do the job and they did not. You cannot steal a skill. You cannot steal your own brain. I scanned the letter and sent it to Caldwell. "Add this to the pile." I wrote, "I spent the afternoon working on the logistics for Bennett Works. I set up the payroll software. I secured the insurance binder. I was building a ship while they were busy throwing rocks at me from the shore. But the real turning point came at 5:30 that evening. I was sitting in my car in the back corner of a diner parking lot on the edge of town. I watched Marcus pull up in his truck. He looked exhausted. He was wearing his work hat pulled low, looking over his shoulder like he was meeting a drug dealer. He slid into the passenger seat of my car. He smelled of sweat and metal dust. "This is getting bad." "Reagan," he said, rubbing his face with grime-stained hands, "Sloan is running around like a headless chicken. She is firing off orders that do not make sense." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. "I pulled this out of the recycling bin in the office," he said. "It is the bid for the new distribution center in Texas." I smoothed the paper out on the dashboard. I scanned the numbers. My eyes widened. I looked at the material column, then I looked at the pricing column. "Oh no," I whispered. "What Marcus asked." She quoted the fire-rated MDF paneling. I said, pointing to the line item, "But she used the price code for standard particle board." Marcus nodded grimly. "I know. That is a difference of $12 a sheet. It was worse than that. On a job this size, that was $40,000 in material costs alone. If they won this bid, they would lose money on every single panel they installed. They would bleed the company dry within 3 months. She does not know the difference," Marcus said. "She just saw board in the system and clicked the cheapest one." I folded the paper. This was not just incompetence. This was gross negligence. This was proof that the current management was a danger to the financial health of the entity. An entity I owned 51% of. "Can I keep this?" I asked. Marcus shrugged. "I never saw it." He reached for the door handle, then stopped. "There is one more thing," he said. He pulled out his phone. "Check the website, the portfolio page." I opened the browser on my phone. I navigated to the Iron Hollow site. Sloan had updated the recent projects section. There was a glossy photo of a custom curved bar we had built for a hotel in Chicago. It was a beautiful piece of work. Complex radius joinery, difficult veneers. I knew it well. I had spent 3 weeks on site in Chicago overseeing the installation. I had slept in a motel and eaten vending machine sandwiches to make sure that bar was perfect. Under the photo, the caption read, "Designed and project managed by CEO Sloan Bennett, a vision of modern luxury." I felt the blood drain from my face. She was stealing my work. She was taking the physical evidence of my labor and pasting her name over it. "This is fraud," I said. "This is false advertising." Marcus opened the door. "Like I said, Reagan, it is getting bad. If you are going to make a move, you better do it soon, before there is nothing left to save." He slipped out into the night. I drove home with the crumpled bid sheet next to me on the seat. The next morning, the dominoes started to fall. Northline Retail Group did not wait for my lawsuit to settle. They sent a team of auditors to the Iron Hollow facility at 9 o'clock. I heard about it from Dave, the junior project manager at Northline, who texted me from the parking lot. "We are here. We asked to see the QC logs for the last 6 months. Sloan handed us a stack of marketing brochures. I could imagine the scene. My father sweating in his suit. Sloan trying to smile her way through a technical audit. Then came the text that made me smile. They asked who signed off on the load calculations for the Fresno job. Sloan said it was a collaborative team effort. The auditor asked for the names of the team. She couldn't name anyone. They are asking for you. Reagan. While Northline was tearing them apart on the operational side, the bank was moving in on the financial side. Caldwell called me at 11 o'clock. First Horizon just pinged my office, he said. His voice was sharp with interest. They saw the drop in monthly revenue, and apparently, someone, maybe a disgruntled supplier, tipped them off about a potential management dispute. They are putting the credit line under administrative review. That means they freeze the money. I said, that means Iron Hollow cannot buy materials for next week. Caldwell confirmed. Your parents are cornered. Reagan, they have no cash, no technical lead, and their biggest client is auditing them. And then, right on cue, the phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. Mom, I let it ring 4 times. Then I picked it up. Hello? Denise, I said. Not Mom. Denise. Reagan. Her voice was soft. It was the voice she used when she wanted to host a charity dinner, the voice of reasonable, elegant compromise. Reagan. Honey, this has gone too far. I said nothing. Your father is not doing well. She continued. His blood pressure is up. We are all very stressed. We want to end this hostility. Then sign the papers. I said, acknowledge the trust. Hand over the voting rights. She sighed, a long, suffering sigh. We can't just hand over the company. Reagan, it is complicated, but we want you to come home. Come for dinner tonight. Let us sit down as a family, without the lawyers. We can talk about a structured buy-in. We can give you a percentage, a real one this time. A percentage I asked. 10%. She offered, generously, over 5 years, and a raise. We will make you VP of Operations. Sloan stays as CEO. Of course, for the optics, but you will have real authority. I closed my eyes. They still did not get it. They were standing in a burning house, offering me a glass of water if I promised to put out the fire, while still claiming they owned the house. I owned 51%. Mother, I said, I do not need you to give me 10%. I already own the majority. Reagan. Be realistic, she snapped, her mask slipping for a second. That old clause, Mr. Henderson says it is open to interpretation. We can fight that in court for years. Do you have the money for that? I looked at the crumpled bid sheet on my table. I looked at the screenshot of Sloan taking credit for my work. I have time, I said. Do you Northline is auditing you today? The bank froze the credit line an hour ago. You have maybe 2 weeks before you miss payroll. There was a silence on the line. A cold, shocked silence. How do you know about the bank? She whispered. Because I am the guarantor. I said, remember, you made me the safety net. Now the net is closing. Reagan, she started, her voice trembling. I am not coming to dinner. Denise, I said, and I'm not accepting 10%. My lawyer will be in touch with a settlement offer. It will be the only one you get. I hung up. I sat there, my heart pounding. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Rejecting her was like cutting off a limb. But I knew that if I went to that dinner, if I let them guilt me back into the fold, nothing would change. I would be the help forever. I stood up to pour myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking. Then my phone rang again. It was Caldwell. I just spoke to her. I told him, answering immediately. They tried to offer me 10%. Forget the 10%, Caldwell said. His voice was different. It was not his usual dry, lawyerly tone. It was the voice of a man who had just found a smoking gun in a murder trial. What is it? I asked. My paralegal was digging through the probate records from your grandfather's estate, just to be thorough, Caldwell said. And we found something attached to a misfiled tax return from 2006. What it is a letter, Caldwell said, from your father to Mr. Henderson. Dated 2 months after your grandfather died. I waited. The air in the room felt heavy. In the letter, Caldwell continued, reading slowly. Your father explicitly asks how to circumvent the educational trigger clause regarding the eldest grandchild. He asks if they can amend the operating agreement to remove it before you come of age. My stomach dropped. And what did Henderson say? I asked. There is a handwritten note in the margin, presumably from Henderson. Caldwell said, It says, cannot remove without beneficiary consent. Recommend non-disclosure. Recommend non-disclosure. They did not just forget to tell me. They did not just interpret it differently. They had conspired to hide it. They knew. I whispered. They knew for 18 years. Yes, Caldwell said. And that, Reagan, is not just a civil dispute about company shares. That is breach of fiduciary duty. That is conspiracy. If we show this to a judge, they do not just lose the company. They could face criminal charges for defrauding a trust beneficiary. I sat down on the floor. I felt dizzy. For 18 years, they had looked me in the eye. They had watched me sweep the floors. They had watched me work for free. They had told me I was not smart enough, and all the while, they were terrified of me. They were hiding my own kingdom from me because they knew that the moment I knew the truth, their charade was over. Do we send it to them? I asked. Caldwell paused. We send it, he said. But we do not send it as a negotiation. We send it as an ultimatum. I looked at the window. The sun was shining. But I felt cold. Draft it. I said, send it. I hung up the phone. I thought about Sloane's Instagram post. Betrayal. Greed. She had no idea. I walked over to my laptop. I opened the folder with the screenshots of Sloane's fake projects. I opened the file with the photo of the crumpled bid sheet. I attached them all to a single email draft addressed to Marcus Vance at Northline. Subject regarding technical leadership, Mr. Vance, per our conversation. Attached is the documentation of the current operational risks at Iron Hollow, along with proof of authorship for the projects in question. Bennett Works is ready to assume the liability. I did not send it yet. I would give my parents 1 hour after they received Caldwell's email. 1 hour to choose between surrender and annihilation. I sat back and watched the clock. The second hand ticked. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded like a countdown. The email Arthur Caldwell sent to my parents and their lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was not long. It did not need to be. It contained a single attachment, a scanned image of the handwritten note from 18 years ago, where my father had asked how to cheat his own daughter out of her inheritance, and their lawyer had advised him to keep it quiet. That document was the queen on the chessboard. It changed the game from a business dispute into a potential criminal fraud case. I sat in my apartment, watching the rain streak against the window. I did not have to shout. I did not have to bang on their door. I just had to wait for the gravity of the situation to crush them. At 9 o'clock, I played my second move. I sent a formal demand letter to the First Horizon Bank lending officer. In the letter, I informed them that as the unwitting personal guarantor, I was disputing the validity of the debt due to fraudulent inducement. I attached the same evidence I had sent to my parents. By 10 o'clock, the bank had reacted exactly as a bank always reacts to uncertainty. They pulled the plug. I received a text from Marcus, the foreman, who was still inside the shop. Reagan, the credit card just got declined at the lumber yard. The driver is stuck at the checkout. Sloane is screaming at the accounting department. I took a sip of my coffee. The credit freeze was the rook taking the open file. Without the credit line, Iron Hollow had no cash flow. They could not buy the maple. They could not buy the steel. They could not buy the fuel for the delivery trucks. At 11 o'clock, Northline Retail Group made their move. Marcus Vance copied me on an email to my father. Grant, we have received notice of a severe governance dispute within your organization. Given the audit failure yesterday and the lack of a technical lead, we are formally pausing all payments on the current expansion project. Furthermore, unless a qualified project manager with full signatory authority, specifically Reagan Bennett, is reinstated with confirmed legal authority by Friday, we will be transferring the master contract to Bennett Works Project Services to ensure continuity. That was the night fork. They were attacking my father's wallet and his pride simultaneously. My father was now standing on a shrinking island. To his left, the bank was demanding $500,000. To his right, his biggest client was threatening to walk, and in front of him, the daughter he had tried to erase was holding the only life raft. I spent the afternoon setting up the payroll system for Bennett Works. I entered the tax codes. I set up the direct deposit forms. I was building a functioning company in real time, creating a landing zone for the inevitable crash. Around 2 o'clock, Sloane tried to break out of the trap. She attempted to bypass the frozen credit line by opening a new emergency account with a secondary supplier in Dallas. It was a desperate, amateur move. I knew about it because the supplier called me. "Reagan, it is Tom from Dallas Hardwoods." "Hey, Tom, your sister just called," Tom said, sounding confused. "She is trying to order 40 sheets of walnut veneer on a Net 30 account. She says she is the CEO now. But when I asked her for the trade references and the bonding number, she hung up on me. What is going on over there? She is having a rough week." "Tom," I said calmly, "I would not open that account if I were you. The receivables are frozen. Thanks for the heads up." Tom said, "I will flag it." Click. Sloane had tried to move her pawn, but she had forgotten that I controlled the board. She had no credit. She had no reputation. In the construction industry, your word is your currency, and hers was counterfeit. At 4 o'clock, my phone rang. It was not my parents. It was Marcus. "Reagan, can we meet?" he asked. "Not here. Somewhere quiet. Me and the lead guys." I met them at a dive bar on the south side of Riverton. It was a dark, quiet place where the floor was sticky and the jukebox played nothing but country songs from the 90s. 5 of them were there. Marcus, the foreman, Miller, the lead fabricator, Pete, the driver, and 2 of the senior installers. These were the men who actually built the company. They were the ones who stayed late. They were the ones who fixed the mistakes. They looked tired. They nursed their beers, looking at me with a mix of hope and fear. "They cut the overtime today," Marcus said heavily. "Sloane came down at 3 and said, 'Nobody works past 5. She said it is a efficiency measure. But we know what it is. They are broke." I nodded. "They are broke because the bank froze the line." Miller leaned forward. "Reagan, I have a kid starting college in September. I cannot miss a paycheck. If this ship goes down, I am in trouble. Your dad is walking around like a ghost. He is not talking to anyone." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of folders. I placed one in front of each man. "I am not asking you to mutiny," I said, "and I am not asking you to break your loyalty, but I am offering you insurance." They opened the folders. Inside were employment contracts for Bennett Works project services. I went through the terms. "I cannot match the seniority bonuses Iron Hollow promised you in 20 years. I said honestly, "But I can pay you the prevailing union wage. Starting Monday, I can guarantee your health insurance day 1. And I can promise you that when you order materials, they will actually arrive." Pete looked at the hourly rate. "It is $2 more an hour than I am making now. I priced it based on the current market." "Pete," I said, "not the rate from 10 years ago." Marcus looked at me. His eyes were sharp. "This contract says we answer to you," he said. "No middle management, no creative directors, just me." I said, "And whoever I hire to sweep the floors." Marcus took a pen from his pocket. He did not sign it immediately. He just held it. "If we sign this, Iron Hollow is dead," he said softly. "Without us, they cannot build a birdhouse. Iron Hollow died the day they decided a brochure was more important than a bolt." I said, "I am just trying to save the people who lived inside it." Marcus nodded. He signed the paper. He slid it back to me. "I am in," he said. One by one, the others signed. Miller, Pete, the installers. I collected the folders. I now had the army. My parents had the castle, but it was empty. I left the bar and drove back to my apartment. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. At 7 o'clock, the call finally came. It was my father. I answered it on the second ring. "Hello, Dad." "Reagan." His voice was barely a whisper. He sounded old. He sounded like a man who had been running for a long time and had finally hit a wall. "We need to stop this," he said. I agree. I said, so send the lawyers the capitulation. Reagan, listen to me. He pleaded. We cannot just hand over the voting rights. It would destroy your mother. She has built her whole identity around this family image. That is not my problem. Dad. Look, he said, his voice taking on a desperate, bargaining tone. I have been looking at the accounts. I have a little money put aside. Personal money. Not company funds. I waited. $5,000, he said. I almost laughed. $5,000. That was the price he put on my career. That was the price he put on the fraud. That was the price he put on my dignity. And I asked, and we forget the email, he said hurriedly. We forget the note from Henderson. You drop the claim on the trust. You let Sloan have the chair. And in exchange, I give you the $5,000, and we write you a glowing letter of recommendation. You can go anywhere. You can start fresh. I felt a cold, hard stone form in my stomach. He still thought I was an employee he could fire with a severance package. He still thought he had the power. Dad, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. I am the majority owner of Iron Hollow Fixtures. I do not need your recommendation. I own the letterhead. Reagan, please, put Mom on the phone, I said. There was a fumbling sound. Then, my mother's voice. Reagan. She did not sound imperious anymore. She sounded small. You knew. I said, you knew about the trust. You knew Grandpa left it to me. Mom was silent for a long time. We were protecting the family. She said finally. Her voice was thin. We wanted peace. We knew that if you took control, there would be conflict. You are so rigid. Reagan, you are like your grandfather. He was a hard man. We wanted Iron Hollow to be different. We wanted it to be soft. We wanted it to be loved. You wanted it to be a lie. I said. We wanted it to be a legacy, she cried out. A legacy where everyone got along, where Sloan could shine, where you could contribute in your own way, in the back, hidden away. I finished for her. Mom took a breath. Reagan, image matters. Perception matters. If the town finds out we are fighting, if they find out about the trust, it looks messy. It looks like we are failing. I just wanted us to look stable. I looked at the demand letter from the bank on my table. I looked at the contract signed by the crew. Mom, I said, Image does not pay the mortgage. Image does not pay the suppliers. And Image is not going to stop the bank from taking the house. So what do you want? She asked. Her voice was dull. Do you want to see us on the street? Is that it? Is this your revenge? I do not want revenge. I said, I want what is mine. I want the 51%, and I want the personal guarantee removed from my name. And Sloan? She asked. Sloan can stay. I said, really? Mom sounded hopeful. She can stay as the director of marketing. I said, with no signatory authority, no operational power, and a salary that matches her actual contribution. Mom gasped. That is humiliating for her. It is reality. Mom, I said, and reality is coming for you tomorrow morning whether you like it or not. I paused. Set up the meeting. I said, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, at the office, have Henderson there, have the bank representative there, and tell Sloan to bring her keys. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I had won. I knew I had won. I had the law, the money, the clients, and the crew, but it did not feel like a victory parade. It felt like a demolition. I was about to walk into the building where I had grown up and tear the foundation out from under the people who raised me. I looked at the blue folder on my desk, the one I had stolen from the office, the ownership transfer plan. I picked up a black marker. I crossed out the word Sloan. I wrote Reagan above it. Then I crossed out phase out. And I wrote executive control. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. I lay awake, rehearsing the moves, the opening statement, the evidence presentation, the closing argument. Tomorrow was not going to be a family reunion. It was going to be a deposition. And I was going to make sure that every single word was recorded for the record. The conference room at Iron Hollow Fixtures smelled of stale coffee and expensive cologne. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. The air conditioning was humming a low, steady drone, but it did little to cool the heat in the room. This was not a family dinner. This was a dissection. On one side of the live-edge walnut table sat my parents and Sloane. They were flanked by Mr. Henderson, their estate lawyer, who looked as if he would rather be undergoing root canal surgery than sitting in this chair. On the other side sat Arthur Caldwell, my attorney. Next to him was Mr. Sterling, the senior loan officer from First Horizon Bank, looking stern and impatient. At the far end of the table sat Dave, the senior project manager from Northline Retail Group. He was there as an observer, but his presence was the heaviest weight in the room. And then there was me. I sat at the head of the table. My father, Grant, started the meeting. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. He looked tired. His skin was gray, and his hands shook slightly as he clasped them on the table. We are here to resolve a misunderstanding regarding the management structure of Iron Hollow. Dad began. We want to assure our partners at the bank and Northline that the transition to Sloane's leadership is proceeding, despite some internal friction. Arthur Caldwell leaned forward. He did not smile. Mr. Bennett, let us dispense with the fiction, Caldwell said. His voice was dry and sharp, like paper being torn. We are not here to discuss a transition. We are here to discuss a restoration of rights. Mom, Denise, cut in. She was wearing a white suit, looking every inch the aggrieved matriarch. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice tight. Reagan is barely out of college. She has zero executive experience. She is a hard worker. Yes, she is excellent with a wrench. But she does not have the strategic mind to run a multi-million-dollar company. We made a decision to put Sloane in charge because Sloane understands the brand. I looked at Sloane. She was staring at her iPad, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Caldwell opened a file folder. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, the scanned letter from 18 years ago. He slid it across the table toward Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, Caldwell said, do you recognize this document? Henderson looked at the paper. He paled. He did not touch it. I would have to review my archives. Henderson stammered. It is a letter from Grant Bennett to you, dated October 2006. Caldwell said. In it, he asks how to circumvent the trust clause that grants 51% of the voting shares to the eldest grandchild upon university graduation. And in the margin, in your handwriting, is the advice to recommend non-disclosure. The room went deadly silent. Mr. Sterling from the bank picked up the paper. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. So, Sterling said, looking at my father, you knowingly concealed a change in ownership control from the bank. When you refinanced the credit line last year, you listed yourself as the 100% owner. That was a false statement. Dad swallowed hard. It was a provisional ownership structure. You intended to defraud the beneficiary, Caldwell interrupted. And by extension, you defrauded the bank. Sloane slammed her hand on the table. Who cares about a letter from 20 years ago, she shouted. Her voice was shrill. I am the CEO now. I have the title. I have the office. Reagan is just trying to steal it because she is jealous. I looked at my sister. Sloane, I said calmly, what is the load-bearing capacity of the cantilever racking for the Fresno project? What she snapped. The Fresno project. I repeated. The one Northline paused. What is the capacity per arm? Sloane blinked. That is a technical detail. I have people for that. I turned to Dave from Northline. Dave, I said, if the CEO cannot answer that question, do you trust her to sign the safety warrant? Dave shook his head. He looked at my father. Grant, look, Dave said, Northline has been clear. We stopped the project because we lost confidence in the quality control. We worked with Reagan for 3 years. We know she checks the math. We do not know Sloane. And frankly, based on the audit yesterday, Sloane does not know the product. Mom bristled. Sloane is learning. You have to give her time. We do not have time, Dave said, his voice rising. We have 50 stores opening in 3 months. If the fixtures are not there, we lose millions. We are not going to wait for your daughter to finish her training wheels phase. Then Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. The bank is also out of time. he said coldly. He tapped the file in front of him. I have reviewed the personal guarantee on the current loan. Ms. Bennett. He nodded at me, claims this was signed under fraudulent inducement. Given the evidence of the hidden trust, I am inclined to believe her. He looked at my father with eyes like flint. If the ownership dispute is not resolved legally by noon today, First Horizon is calling the note. We will freeze all operating accounts. We will seize the inventory, and we will pursue personal assets to cover the $450,000 balance. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Mom. Mom looked at the window. They were cornered. The bank was the wall. Northline was the hard place, and I was the only door. Dad looked at me. His eyes were pleading. Reagan, he whispered, you cannot let them do this. This is your grandfather's company. I stood up. I walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. I picked up a marker. I drew a line down the middle. I turned to face them. You have two choices, I said. My voice was steady. I was not shouting. I was not crying. I was negotiating. Option A. I said, I wrote Bennett, works on the right side. I walk out of this room. I take Bennett Works Project Services, which is fully licensed and insured as of yesterday. Dave transfers the Northline contract to my new entity. I hire the crew who have already signed employment agreements with me. By the way, Iron Hollow defaults on the loan. The bank seizes the assets. You lose the building, you lose the house, and I sue you for fraud regarding the trust. Sloan gasped. You stole the crew. I offered them stability. I corrected. Something you could not give them. I pointed to the left side of the board. Option B. I said, we acknowledge the trust. You sign the paper admitting that I own 51% of Iron Hollow fixtures. I take over as CEO immediately. I looked at my mother. Sloan stays. I said, Mom's head snapped up. She stays as director of marketing. I continued. She handles the website. She handles the brochures. She handles the image. But she has no operational authority. She cannot sign checks. She cannot sign contracts. And she answers to me and you. Dad, I said, looking at him, you retire. Today, you stay on as chairman emeritus. You get a small stipend, but you go play golf. You are done. And the debt, Dad asked, his voice trembling. I pointed to Sterling. If I am the majority owner, and if I am the CEO, I will reaffirm the personal guarantee. I said, I will put my name, my real name, with my full consent on the line to secure the company. The bank keeps the credit line open. The payroll gets met. The lights stay on. I looked at Sterling. Does that satisfy the bank? I asked. Sterling looked at me. He looked at the calm, controlled woman standing at the whiteboard. If you are the majority owner and the CEO, yes, Sterling said, we will reinstate the line. I looked at Dave. Does that satisfy Northline? Dave nodded immediately. If Reagan is signing the specs, we are back in business. I capped the marker. I placed it on the table. The choice is yours. I said, total collapse or a change in command. You have 5 minutes. The silence that followed was heavy. Sloan was crying silently, tears ruining her perfect makeup. Mom was staring at me as if I were a stranger she had just met. But Dad was looking at the papers. He was looking at the reality of the situation. He realized that the daughter he had dismissed as just hands had just outmaneuvered him with her head. He picked up the pen. Grandmom hissed, "You cannot sign that. It is giving everything away." "We lost it 18 years ago. Denise," Dad said softly. "We just didn't tell anyone." He signed the document. He slid it to Henderson. Henderson notarized it with a shaking hand. Dad looked up at me. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "I hope you know what you're doing, Reagan." He said, "It is heavy. The crown is heavy." I picked up the document. I checked the signature. It was valid. "I know, Dad," I said, "but I have strong hands." Remember, Mom stood up. She gathered her purse. She looked at me with a mixture of bitterness and respect. "You are hard, Reagan," she said, "just like your grandfather. I always said you were not like us. I said you were not clever like Sloan. I said you were just labor." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had valued a photo on Instagram more than the daughter standing in front of her. "You were right, Mom," I said. "I am labor. But you forgot one thing." "What is that?" she asked. "Labor owns the means of production," I said. I turned to Dave. "Let us go to the shop floor." "Dave," I said, "we have a schedule to verify." I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I heard Sloane sobbing. I heard Dad sigh. I walked down the metal stairs to the factory floor. The machines were silent. The men were standing in a cluster near the break room, looking anxious. Marcus was there. Miller was there. They saw me coming down the stairs. They saw the blue folder in my hand, the one that now said Executive Control. They saw Dave from Northline walking beside me. Marcus stepped forward. "Reagan," he asked. "It is done, Marcus." I said, "Fire up the CNC. We have 50 stores to build." A slow grin spread across Marcus's face. He turned to the crew. "You heard the boss?" he shouted. "Helmets on. Let us make some sawdust." The shop roared to life. The air compressor kicked on with a thud. The saws began to whine. The smell of wood and oil filled the air. I stood in the center of the floor. The vibration of the machines came up through the soles of my boots. It traveled up my legs, into my spine, and settled in my heart. It was not the vibration of fear anymore. It was the hum of power. I opened the blue folder. I looked at the org chart. I took a pen from my pocket and drew a line through the phase-out date. I wrote a new date. Today. I did not need them to choose me. I did not need them to love me. I did not need their validation or their apologies. I closed the folder. Grandpa taught me that you can't build a house on a rotten foundation. I had torn the house down, and now I was going to build something that would last. I walked toward the office. My office ready to work. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your way to work, at the gym, or maybe in your own workshop? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed Reagan's journey, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Stay strong, and remember, know your worth.